Hello, Chris Ruden. How are you today?
Very good. Thanks for having me today.
I'm so happy to have you here. I wanted to let you know I watched your new speaker reel and it's terrific.
Thank you so much.
And
I'm so happy with it. I'm so proud of it. So it's very nice when you finally get that thing that's like, oh, this is exactly what I wanted.
wow, what goes into making that? He's
Loaded.
shaking his head for those people who are just listening.
That is a loaded question. You know those things that just look so nice, like, wow, that's
Yeah.
nice, and you don't realize the nightmare that it is. Just years of accumulating video where the video is perfect and the audio is off or vice versa, and then the countless edits. It's so weird that you have to work so hard to make something seem so simple. And I'm
Yeah,
sure you get that in certain elements with the podcast, but
absolutely. Yeah.
it's finally there and I'm happy and there's breathing room.
Awesome. Well, congratulations. One of the things that I love in the speaker reel is that you describe yourself as the only seven-fingered type 1 diabetic, pro powerlifter, motivational speaker, New York Fashion Week model, and season 1 contestant of The Rock's The Titan Games. First of all, wow. And second of all, that really sums up my favorite quote, which is Oscar Wilde's "Be yourself, everyone else is already taken. You are the only one who." And what a cool combination. We'll talk more about that. So Chris went from defining himself through his disability or his limb difference and feeling shame and hiding for 17 years to getting unstuck by choosing to change how he saw himself. He claimed his unique power and started to live his best life. He's a brand strategist, a professional keynote speaker who focuses on disability inclusion, culture, and change management. He helps people and organizations overcome adversity and build trust and resilience. And he does all of this in order to help create the foundation for individuals and teams to adapt and thrive as change inevitably unfolds. He's a 2-time published author of The Upper Hand and the Art of Changing Course. He has 150,000 followers with 7 million views and counting. And I watched your YouTube videos about when you first unhid and uncovered your hand. I have never seen a more human, vulnerable video in my life. And the combination of your vulnerability and your strength and your fear and just all at the same time and in different flashes and different moments. And then you followed it up with your first day with your new prosthetic hand. And the bravery and excitement and same fear and frustration at moments, all of it was so human. And this was for someone who already had an image, and you kind of dropped the veil and really got out there and shared. And it was so powerful to see. So I wanted to let you know that that really impacted me. I am thrilled to have you here. And I just want to officially welcome you again to the podcast.
That's one of the best introductions I've ever had.
Oh,
So I
wow.
really appreciate that whole video and that time. It was really hard to feel that bravery because you see it in the movies. You're like, oh, what does brave feel like? What does strength feel like? And you always think it's going to be this awesome feeling thing. It's not. It's not. Bravery feels awful. It feels awful. But you know that there's something on the other side of it. You know that if I'm willing to not feel the best right now, and that not best feeling is just taking a risk on yourself. So it took me a very long time to take a risk on myself because of the narratives. And I'm sure things we're going to get into today, but I really appreciate that. And it was the hardest decision of my life, but also the best decision of my life to stop hiding who I thought I was because of my disability.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if this is exactly what you were saying in the first video, but you kept saying, this is really hard over and over again. And it was so interesting because you could see it. I saw you almost catching your breath literally at points. And no wonder it's resonated with so many people.
It's the equivalent of being on a high dive and you're like, I'm going to go, I'm going to go, I'm going to go. That's the feeling because you know you're going to, but not yet. It's just one of those, okay, I'm here, but showing up is most of the battle anyways.
And that's so interesting that that's the analogy you use because I just recorded an episode with my dad about when I came out to my dad. And the analogy I use is jumping off of a cliff.
That is the exact feeling. So anyone who knows that thing, it is the
Yes.
same feeling, you know.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So what else might you want people to know about the work you do professionally?
I think being born with a disability that is visible and then later in life getting an invisible disease or disability like type 1 diabetes, and being a guy that presents himself in a more masculine way just by choice, that's just how I feel personally. I felt like I was constantly fighting those battles of I want to show up a certain way in the world, but also the world doesn't see me that way. They see
Mhm.
me as maybe broken, or they see me as less than because of something I never asked for. That kind of shaped or caused me to react in certain ways until I took hold of my life. But now what I do is I help people see their world without limits,
Mhm.
whether that's other people with disabilities or marginalized communities, or that's leaders in corporate or association space who want their teams to communicate or collaborate more effectively. I help people see whatever that world is for them without the limits that are presenting for whatever reason. So I help people notice things that they might have never noticed. And I do that on a professional level across the world. I'm very fortunate to be in a position to teach from not only experience, but knowledge and expertise around change and inclusion. If you told my 14-year-old self I'd be doing this, I'd be on a podcast with you, I would have probably ran away because there's
Yeah.
no way I would have led with the thing that I thought hurt me most. So I'm
Yeah.
just very thankful to be here and to have made decisions that led me to this point. And now it's my job to give back.
So beautiful. Can you give me an example of helping people notice things that they may not have noticed?
Because I'm a professional speaker by trade, everything becomes a story, even if I don't try to. My friend's like, oh, here he goes with the story again. It's just how I communicate.
Yeah.
So many people have either great ideas or great qualities about themselves or an opportunity in front of them. They're just facing the wrong direction. So if you are this close to the wall, your nose is an inch from the wall, you can't see the bigger picture. So if the only color you see is brown and you don't like brown, you're going to say, this picture stinks. But if I was able to help you back up a little bit, and you're
Right.
like, wow, this is actually the Mona Lisa, and it's an incredible painting. The painting didn't change. Your vantage point, your perspective did. So when I go into teams, they say, yeah, our team communication is just awful. Everyone's in silos. It's terrible. I give leaders or even people the lens of curiosity to say, is that true?
What else
Is
might be
that the
true?
problem or is that the symptom of the problem?
Mhm.
So many people treat symptoms of problems, not core of problems.
Yes.
And then even if you get to the core of the problem, we have to have the curiosity to say, okay, this is the core of the problem, but why did this happen in the first place? What I'm able to do is in a less biased way, step in and say, hey, why don't we use curiosity as a lens to uncover the real issues so that we can manage on changing them, not just initially, but in a sustained way. Anyone can be confident for a moment. How do you sustain confidence? Anyone can take a risk in the moment, but how do you sustain risk to innovate, whether that's yourself or your career? I use curiosity as a tool and guide people through that.
And that work must be so rewarding.
It really is. As long as people get out of their own way, it really creates opportunity. And people might say, oh, that's a very soft skill, like curiosity. Curiosity is innovation. Curiosity to connect people more, to include people more, to create better cultures, cultures that return in profitability just because you used humanity and not sacrificing what you ultimately want for what you want right now.
I couldn't agree more wholeheartedly. And then can you tell us something about you personally, something people may not know about you, something that lights you up?
I got known in the online space, and my claim to fame was through powerlifting, lifting heavy weights as a person with one hand, being able to deadlift 650, 675 pounds, break state records. I was completely known as the fitness guy. That was my whole identity. And that's just how I became me. I competed in powerlifting. I competed in bodybuilding. I won against non-disabled people, and it was really cool. But then I accomplished those goals and I kind of had an identity crisis. I'm like, oh my God, I'm not the powerlifting guy anymore. I'm not the fitness guy anymore by choice. And now I play pickleball and I absolutely love playing pickleball.
Cool.
It's one of those things people see me like, oh, you bodybuilder, you powerlift. I'm like, I go to the gym a little bit now, but it's not my life anymore. Now I truly enjoy things like pickleball or traveling and just enjoying my life and speaking. But I think the hardest thing for people to understand is to see me and see past accolades, so to speak, and understand that's not my identity. It's just habits that I partake in. So
Right.
now my habit just happens to be pickleball.
Oh, see, I'm a tennis player and I've actually been on a little hiatus and I've been debating pickleball. You think you're re-inspiring me to?
It's a lot of fun. I would say as a more introverted person, it's a lot of fun to meet people. I judge myself because I'm like, no, I have to be the fitness guy. I'm like, wait, I'm just creating labels for myself. You'll have different chapters in your life. You'll have different interests, and sometimes those interests will go away. I've been practicing being more okay with being present and not trying to control the present. Right now, that's leading me to just enjoy things without having to compete or pursue. And it's not a complacency thing. It's more so a being at peace thing. Maybe I'm just getting older, So,
I think being present will do that though,
yeah.
right? What am I being called to at the moment? It's that
And
simple,
that's
right?
completely okay.
Yeah. Okay. What are your pronouns?
My pronouns are he, him.
Great. And you touched on it before, but if you were going to describe who you are in your navigating your career as an outsider story, how would you describe that?
The career I have now is based on the person I used to be. I used to know, even though it wasn't true, I used to know that I was broken. I used to know that I was useless and helpless and less than because of my disability. I used to label myself, and that created a glass ceiling on what I could ever become. So I tried so hard to just blend in and disappear. It wasn't until I let that idea go that I stopped convincing myself that I was right. I allowed myself to be wrong so that I could create what I do now. I help people just like myself be able to, one, see their world without limits, yes, but two, question and be more curious about the things they know. I love being able to not be sure and to question because it gives room for hope and change and adaptation and moving forward. So that's kind of my outsider story in a nutshell. I was the outsider, and now I speak to those outsiders to invite them in.
And you speak to people who may not define themselves as outsiders, but still have opportunity to step into their power even more because perhaps in some ways, I've talked about this on the podcast with other guests, we're all keeping something back. We're all hiding something in some way. Does that feel right to you?
There's always the thing or the thing behind the thing. There's that whole elephant in the room. Your whole house will be extremely clean except for that elephant over there. And you're like, don't look over there. Don't look there. Look how amazing this is over here.
Yes.
We're always redirecting, whether it's for ourselves or for other people.
Yeah.
I think everyone can progress, not just for the sake of progression, but for the sake of quality of life. That's extremely important to me. And I know what it was like to not have quality of life because of an internal communication issue that I had or because of a situational issue that I found myself in. So I truly believe by working through those things, especially being aware of them and having the curiosity to say, how could we even change this? What would that look like? There is a better version of your life if you believe there to be. That's where my work kind of starts.
That's great. So if we're going to start to step into your story, for anyone who hasn't seen you, would you be open to describing your limb difference a little bit so that people
absolutely.
understand?
For those on video, you can see I have 2 fingers on my left hand and a shorter left arm. So my left arm is about 4 inches shorter than my right. And I have some limitations in movement like pronation and supination. I can't do that. But I was born that way. And I was technically born with all of my fingers, but they were all interconnected. So for mobility's sake, they opted to cut out the majority of the bones in my left hand. I could have had a surgery to elongate my arm to make it more normal, but there was a huge risk of completely losing function. And I'm very thankful my parents at birth decided not to go that route. Instead of just trying to look as normal, which I put air quotes, as possible, they opted for function. And I'm very thankful for that.
Yeah.
Middle school me would have probably opted for looks, but that's part of what society does. We internalized ableism. We just think, if only I could look like everyone else. And then as you get older or you start to change your mindset, you say, what does look like everyone else even mean? You know, if 1/4 of the population has some sort of disability, don't I already look like everyone else?
That's a very good point. Now, you mentioned the term ableism, and it's not a term we've actually used on the podcast. Would you be open to sharing how you define ableism, how it applies to you?
To me, ableism is the stigmatic view of people with disabilities being less than or incapable or perceived in a negative light. When we hear the word disability, if they see my hand or my arm or I happen to mention it, they will say something to the effect of, oh, I'm so sorry. Oh, I will pray for you. Oh, that is awful. Oh, that's not a disability because look how strong you are. I'm sort of negating the facts, which is I was born and had amputation and I have less fingers.
Yep.
That's just a fact. That's neither good nor bad. It's just a fact. But somehow disability with ableism has become a negative thing. It is ableist to assume that I am less than capable because I am differently abled. The sinister part of ableism is internalized ableism. It's where I start to believe and recode my possibility because of ableism and how I'm now accepting that label and I'm practicing it.
You're taking what you're receiving externally and the types of statements that you just heard, and you're internalizing it.
Yes, definitely internalizing them and then almost making sure that they're true. You're proving to yourself that it's right. So you're cherry picking data to say this is true. I hid my hand in my pocket for 17 years to the point where if I had my backpack on and I put my hand in my pocket, I would have to raise my hand and go to the bathroom just to take my hand out of my pocket, just to take my backpack off. Otherwise, the backpack would dangle on my left side the entire day because I would not take my hand out of my pocket.
Wow.
It was that extreme because I felt like if I hid my disability, people would love me. If I hid my disability, everything would be better. This is the worst possible thing, and I will not show it no matter what. I would risk my own safety just to stay hidden.
Wow. You mentioned middle school. I believe that's where the hiding started. Prior to that, you had been participating and not hiding. And then there was this incident with a girl you had a crush on.
So in elementary school, I grew up with a lot of the same kids. There were some bullying or comments that were negative, but it was relatively manageable because everyone kind of knew each other. That school closed down, so I had to go to a different school. And that's when everything changed. That's when I knew, wow, I am different. It's bad. That I was made aware. I tried to adjust, but I'm also a 12-year-old boy. So I met this girl named Crystal in my class, and she was the prettiest girl in my class. I worked up the courage to ask her out, and I walked up to her desk, and I'll never forget, her desk was right by the teacher's desk, and all of my friends started laughing. So I turned around to tell them, hey guys, like, stop, you're going to mess this up. You know, I was ready. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I was going to do something. Yeah. And I turned back around, and Crystal picked up a stapler, and she is making fun of my hand, calling me Claw Boy in front of the entire class. She humiliated me, not only to my face, but in front of everyone. And everyone was laughing, and I had to pretend like it didn't hurt, but it killed me. And I immediately shoved my hand in my pocket. And from that point, for 17 plus years, I either kept my hand in my pocket for the next few years and then eventually switched to a glove. But I hid my hand all the way from there until I was 27 years old.
That's unbelievable. Crushing is the only word I can think of, and almost like sucker punched and just knocking the wind out of you.
Up until that point, I moved freely, and that was the start of moving very guarded. That was the start of being more calculated. I think it hurt so bad that I just started to disassociate. That's where apathy and survival kicked in. So I pretty much used disassociation to be okay. I felt like a chameleon because I was constantly trying to blend in. But also it got to the point where I was so tactical about everything. If I had to go somewhere, I was looking where the doors were, how they opened, and how I could turn so that people wouldn't see my arm. I planned on where I would sit far before we even got anywhere near it. If I was going to the movies, I would make sure I would book tickets so that I would be on the left side so no one sat on my left side. It was so exhausting to have to plan to hide and still look normal. Being present wasn't a thing. That was impossible. I can only look at the pain looking back because to survive those moments, there was no pain. There was just apathy. There was just numbness. And I feel for people because I've been there. And you could have told me anything in that moment. I probably wouldn't have listened. My journey is my journey. And I can't say I wish it would have happened sooner or later. I can just say that I'm glad I made it through. But now if I can position people to at least have enough curiosity to say, is there another way? That's my job.
You were in full-on survival mode. And we talk about on the podcast that it's exhausting to hide. I'm talking about exhausting to hide when you don't have to do everything that you just described, right? Look at every angle of your day and decide how it is that you're going to physically move through your day so that you can continue to keep your hand hidden. That's just an extra, I don't even want to say layer, like block of hiding and exhaustion and worry and mental space that gets taken up. I can't even imagine how you did that for so long. I give you a lot of credit for surviving and for getting through because that's a lot to manage.
It is. It's very hard. And it's not just one layer either, unfortunately. And that's why whenever I see people we all have to understand that when you see a struggle on someone, chances are that it's multifactorial. Because if I'm hiding my hand, I'm uncomfortable with the fact that this is the way I am and this is how people are interacting with me. But that doesn't stop at school. I was embarrassed that I was getting made fun of, and I was embarrassed for my parents.
Mm.
So I had to hide what was happening to me from my parents. I
Oh,
had to
wow.
hide from my classmates in the world. I had to hide everything all the time. To my mom, I had the best day ever. I had to because I couldn't risk her being upset. And I took that burden as a kid. It really does come from that internalized ableism of, okay, I'm not enough, so I need to step up. And that's not true. That's not true. And that's part of why I want to break that stigma. But it is definitely exhausting. So anyone who is hiding, I see those struggles that a lot of people will never be exposed to, which is you are hiding everywhere all the time and you have
Mhm.
no place or no sense of when do I get a break?
Yeah. Why is it that you feel like you couldn't allow your mom to be upset?
Because she couldn't change it and she would want to so bad. And I knew what it felt like to want to change something that you can't. I wouldn't want her to hurt. There's no right answer. No, I should have or I shouldn't have. That's a hard struggle that just happened that way. Even talking to my mom now about it, she's like, I wish you would have told me. And I was like, I can't say that I wish I would have, but I can just tell you why I did it and what my goals were with that.
It's almost like you would have been pulling her into the abyss with you, and you needed her to be okay for her and for you also, I would
Exactly.
imagine.
Being a parent, I couldn't imagine hearing your kid say all of these things and you can't do anything. You have to go to work that day. You have to go to work knowing your kid is just not having a good time. There's no right answer. And sometimes that's part of life is there is no right answer. We're looking for that one thing, that magical wand or that one belief. Sometimes it doesn't work that way. And that is part of life. So how do we accept things as they are, but also recognize the things that should be changed? I can change the perspective on ableism and stigma. I can't change the fact that I have a disability.
Yeah. So you at some point decide you want to play drums, and that changes your life and your hiding in some pretty significant ways. First of all, why drums? Because talk about the thing that is the most physical you could possibly choose to use your hands for.
I definitely developed a competitiveness to compete for approval or to compete for proof that I can do things. Anything I could do that would be competition, from playing chess to even random sports or events to foursquare and kickball. Drums were one of those things where at the time I loved music. Guitar was impossible because of the dexterity, but drums, I saw it and I'm like, okay, maybe there's a way we could attach a stick or something. And my dad ended up duct taping a stick to my arm and we
Yeah.
tried that and it worked a little bit, but it was a little too stiff. So somehow we came across a glove, a fingerless glove, and I shoved a drumstick through the finger hole of a glove and it happened to work. So I started doing that and taking lessons and I fell in love with how diverse and so many elements. Drums are all over the place. The chaos
Mhm.
maybe I was attracted to. And then that became my next 5+ years. I went into band and I was on drumline. I found my group of people in high school that I spent every waking moment with them. The band
Mhm.
kids, specifically the drumline kids, those became my best friends. And to this day, some of them are still my great friends. So I think that really helped me to have a community.
That makes sense. That's so cool. And then the glove itself changed your life in a lot of ways, right?
The glove itself was so much freedom and then ended up becoming identity. The first half of the year in my freshman year in high school, I was still having my hand in my pocket. And then for band, which was at the end of the day, I would go into the bathroom, put my glove on, and then I'd go to band practice. After that first half, I was like, what happens if I just wore the glove to school?
Mhm.
And then I didn't do anything. So coming back to the next semester, I just started wearing the glove. I got a few comments, but then it just became known I was the kid with the glove. And
Right.
that was the best thing for me because if it was just accepted that I'm the kid with the glove and it's not a conversation, great, let's just not talk about it. So no one said anything.
And you must have worn it with some swagger and confidence so that people just were like, That's it. That's it. That's what's happening here.
That's it. I projected the most amount of confidence. I always found myself in leadership positions, whether it was on drumline or I started a dance club because I did hip hop and break dance. I did every weird thing that you would never imagine you could do with one hand.
So
But I just did it to be like, look how cool this is. Elephant in the room. Don't look over there. Look over here. So I loved being on stage, even from an early age. I'm literally dancing with my disability out there. You see the glove, it's obvious, but I got in front of it so that I could hide it. Hiding in plain sight was the definition of who I was.
And you mentioned masculinity earlier and that you're a very masculine guy. Then you mentioned how masculinity kind of intertwined for you in your experience with your limb difference.
This took me a long time because I think an incorrect grasp on what masculinity is was me growing up, because I thought if I was able to hide my weakness, I saw disability as weakness, another form of ableism. If I was able to hide my weakness, people would love me. People would only align themselves with me if I presented as typical strong. Strength is not disability. Strength is not having a limb difference. That's gross. That's ugly. How can I make this not ugly? How can I hide? That's what I thought masculinity was. Being more loud, being willing to test people, being aggressive. But those were all coping mechanisms to deal with what I was going through. The aggression came because I was frustrated with my own life. The anger came because of those things. And I'm not making an excuse for my behaviors back then. But what I will say is that was not tied to my masculinity. That was tied to my lack of awareness and what the real problem was. What I've learned and leaned into is the masculinity of being vulnerable is strength. You can't know strength without testing it. A lack of vulnerability doesn't make you strong. It makes you safe. Life is not always safe. I really wanted to present as this guy who was confident, but I wasn't. I wanted to present as this guy who could handle anything, but I couldn't. I wanted to be that guy because I thought that's what I needed to be. And what I didn't realize, I didn't need outward flexing. I needed inward confidence in myself. And confidence doesn't mean I love every part of myself all the time. It just means I'm willing to take a risk on myself and I'm willing to be okay with where I'm at right now.
It's interesting too, because you said this earlier and I found myself saying this about myself on an episode of the podcast last year, because I think a lot of people who are marginalized, you're not starting on an equal playing field. So there's this tendency to overcompensate and overachieve. I found myself saying also, I think without realizing it, I was trying to create a distraction. Just like you just said, hey, look over here, look at what I'm achieving, look at what I'm doing, so that people weren't paying attention to the parts of me that I wasn't ready to share yet, that I wasn't comfortable with. So that's very
100% distraction. Yeah. I'll never forget. I was still hiding my hand. I was in a gym and I was on my bodybuilding career. I was doing push-ups on the end of a bench. And because my arm is shorter, I'm rotated when I'm doing push-ups. You know, my left shoulder is closer. Yep. So if you saw it and you didn't know better, you'd be like, that guy is doing push-ups wrong. That's wrong. That's bad. A big bodybuilder guy who was a personal trainer there, he came up to me. He's like, hey man, you can't do that. You got to rotate this way and you got to make sure your arms are equal. And I just stood up. I didn't say anything. I just stood up. He's like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. You have a fantastic physique. That's awesome. It just made me realize, oh, the physique is the distraction for the thing. He saw my physique and just thought I was doing something wrong. He couldn't even see that I had a disability because in his mind, no one who looked like my physique had a disability. That is so drastically far away from what disability is to most people's brains. I was in People magazine, a 2-page spread in People magazine where my body, you see abs and like my back and everything, my legs. And people are like, oh, I didn't even notice the disabilities because it's a distraction.
Yeah.
Part of that was out of distraction. Now I fell in love with changing my body my way, but part of that in the beginning was definitely a distraction.
That makes perfect sense. I would imagine that over time, the exhaustion built, you mentioned some anger. How's this starting to build up for you leading up to when you decide to finally share?
I went through a very bad phase of being numb, but also being a 16-year-old, a 17-year-old, 18-year-old in a lower socioeconomic area. And while that's not an excuse, I definitely was partaking in things that I shouldn't, with people that I shouldn't. That was just another form of displacing those feelings I didn't want to deal with. Turning to alcohol or other substances, it stopped me from feeling bad. And I was like, anything that stops me from feeling bad. When you're in that moment, you are surviving. You don't care. You're like, whatever, this is great. I'll just do it again and again and again. And I found myself on a downward spiral. I knew that I eventually needed to change it. So I'm fortunate that eventually came for me, but that was a blur, honestly, from getting into college to until I was 27 was just do whatever, say whatever, be whatever. I started building my business. I started doing things, but also I was still doing messed up things too. On one hand, I knew I needed to start progressing my life. On another, opportunities were coming to me because I was accomplishing these amazing feats.
So very split sort of an
Very,
experience.
very split because I was like, oh, life is starting to get on easy mode for me, even though it wasn't, because I was out and about sharing parts of my story and people were loving it. So I started to get some fame. I started to get some notoriety. I started to break records. But inside, I was in shambles. I felt like I was in middle school again, managing all of these expectations and hiding. And everyone thinks I'm so amazing. I don't feel that way. And I hate this. I loved the things I was doing, but I hated the feeling that I had. So it was almost a full circle moment where I was like, I'm not going to do this again. Something has to change.
Now, I don't know exactly where this story fits in the timeline, but you talk about being in a public speaking situation, and I think you were backstage and there was a little girl that
Yes. So I built a fitness business first, and I had a very successful fitness business online. And I always knew I wanted to speak to some capacity. I got an opportunity to speak in the diabetes space. So at 19, I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. And it was a shock, but it was the best thing for me because it kind of directed me to be like, okay, I was very hidden about my disability. What happens if I leaned into the diabetes thing and became an advocate? Because I knew the way I did disability was not right. It wasn't good for me. So I leaned into diabetes. I got my first opportunity to speak in the diabetes space probably when I was 24, 25 at a nonprofit. And it went great. That developed my love for speaking and my passion to understand it. Fast forward a few years, I was speaking in the diabetes space regularly. One of the most pivotal moments for me to stop hiding my hand was at an event for diabetes. There was about 1,000 people there, and I was the keynote speaker. It was at Disney Coronado Springs, and I would always spend time with families there. It was incredible. I met this family, specifically this little girl. She was 11 at the time, and she followed me around like a puppy. It was incredible. She was the cutest girl. She was so awesome. I bought her a hat, and she just loved. She absolutely loved me. We're walking down this long corridor to go to one of the rooms, and she's with me, just me and her walking. She's on my left side, which is not normal because usually I keep everyone away. Even though I had the glove on, I kept everyone away. She grabs my hand over my glove and she just starts swinging it like a kid would. And I froze. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to react. Everything in me was just like panic. Does she even know that I have a disability? What's going on? Is she going to take my glove off? Everything went through my mind. And I look over and she looks at me and she smiles and she's like, it's okay. You don't have to hide around me. It was one of those moments that was like, all of these people were here to see me speak, but she is the only one who actually saw me. Everyone else was just like, wow, your message is nice. Wow, that's inspiring. And she was like, I see you and it's okay because I like you. And that was like, it broke me in the best way. It really made me think, damn, if she sees me and I'm enough for her, why am I not enough for myself?
Wow.
And that was the start of finally taking my glove off and leaning into what life could look like if I stopped hiding.
That's so powerful. She saw you for who you really are, and all there was love, and how that just was a game changer, understandably, for what should be and what was possible.
I knew I needed that moment, but when it happened, I was on the diving board. This is terrifying, but it was needed. It was needed. And I'm so thankful for that moment. That moment started a cascade of situations that eventually led to me making that video on YouTube and coming out. I really started to learn how to enjoy my life at 27.
Yes. So I'm starting a new segment this season on the podcast called The Thrive Takeaway. If listeners remember only one thing from our conversation today, one thought, one piece of advice, what would you want them to carry with them so that they can thrive in their careers?
Curiosity is the number one skill that you could choose to develop and practice in your life. Switch from certainty to curiosity. If you are able to stop saying this is bad or this is never going to work, instead of saying this is an absolute, ask, how might this turn out? How might I make this work? If this were to work, what would that look like? Being curious gives you room to move. What is one thing that if you were wrong about would change everything? You have to find the elephant in the room and you have to look at it and you have to say, okay, what happens if the way I'm thinking about this is wrong? I know I have a disability. The elephant in the room is not the disability. The elephant in the room for me was I told myself, because I have this disability, I'll never find love. I'll never find happiness. I'm limited in what I can do. No one will like me. Those were the elephants in the room. Why did I tell myself that? I was afraid of what other people thought. Maybe, but in reality, the elephant in the room was me. I told myself I was broken. And just because I felt that way didn't make it a fact. Feelings are not facts. Feelings are real, but they are not facts.
They're signals.
They're signals. And you cannot fix what you're not willing to face. That's so important. You cannot fix what you're not willing to face.
Thank you. I love that. That's today's Thrive takeaway. If you're listening and it got you thinking, I invite you to explore your own path to thriving in your career and beyond. My free Thriving assessment offers a gentle but powerful way to get clarity on where you're excelling and where you can increase joy, fulfillment, and impact. It takes just minutes and gives you instant personalized results. You'll find it at shantijoygold.com in the upper right-hand corner. Just briefly, if you could tell us, when you finally took the glove off and you knew that you wanted to make an impact, what is the impact that you wanted to make?
I think the pain I felt was the lighthouse for, I don't want people to feel that way, and I don't want people to make people feel that way. I don't want people to feel stuck. Feeling stuck is a terrible feeling, and it's something we learn to accept. I don't want people to feel like there's no other option. I want people to understand, how do we learn to change? How do we learn to have accountability? How do we learn to just do better for ourselves and set those not only goals, but how to get to those goals? I was able to find ways through adaptation on how to lift weights, going from having one hand and not being able to lift weights to lift some weights to breaking world records. There's a process there, yes, with a hook and with all the things that I did, and maybe with exercise science, which I got a degree in. But take away exercise and look at the concept. We had a lofty goal and we broke it down day by day. What do I need to do in this moment to win this moment? And I learned, if we win moments, we build confidence. And if we build confidence, we take more risks. If we take more risks, we find ways we would have never imagined. What happens if I took that and I packaged it and I helped people with their problems? Fast forward to today, so many teams are struggling around culture or organizational health. We're moving faster than ever. There's no normal because there's always a new normal. So there's no stability with how quick things are changing. So how do you create stability? Well, we have to look at the teams because we always have people to fall back on. Is the culture there? Is it an inclusive culture or is it a non-inclusive culture? That's what I do now, is I help people see the situation for what it is, what they want it to be, and develop a plan to get there.
And really build a foundation of trust underneath all of it, right?
Trust and psychological safety is a component to move free. So if you do not have trust, you don't have a team. If you don't have a team, there's no future. You might survive the moment, but surviving moments is not thriving. It's not sustainable. There's no innovation. There is a competitive disadvantage if your team does not have trust or psychological safety.
You're speaking my love language when it comes to corporate environments and just how to show up in a human way that'll allow people to bring their best. So I love that. Awesome. All right. I'm going to pivot us toward the segment that I call It's My Podcast. So there will be music. And I will ask you what I ask everyone, which is, if there were one song you could put in a time capsule and preserve at all costs for future generations, what would it be and why?
It would probably be Hopeful by Trey Songz and Twista. And I can't remember the other person on there, but the song was also featured in Coach Carter. It is just an uplifting message of hopeful change. Same thing that I talk about. Even hearing the instrumental, it just puts me in a better mood to change the way I think. I love the messaging around that song. It's not overly positive, but it's more so just like hope, not success, not winning, not crushing your enemy. It's just hope. So it's R&B with a slight upbeat to it. And the singer on the chorus is just hopeful, finding a way. We'll make a way somehow. Don't know how, but we will.
Yeah.
That messaging is how I live my life now. I will find a way. One way or another, I will find a way. Some might see that as, wow, you're so resilient. Yes, and hopeful. Hopeful that there is a way to make it through. And sometimes it's not fun. Sometimes it's you're making it through, but you got a few bumps and scrapes along the way. Or you had to completely switch gears. But if you're hopeful enough to find a way, there is a way.
Well, I think you're living proof of that. And I don't mean to be cheesy when I say it, but yeah, I really do. So what else would you like to let people know about the work you're doing in the world and where people can find you?
I think the last thing I really want to share that's really important to how I help people, and I hope that this could help someone specifically. I wrote my last book with a major publisher. It's called The Art of Changing Course. A small part of that book, but it was a really big part to me, is learning to separate habit from identity. I didn't realize that I did this, but I hear people all the time, whether I work with them personally or on a large scale. People say, oh, I'm just not good at this. I'm a lazy person. I'll even ask you right now, are you a morning person or a night person?
I'm a morning person.
Perfect. That's not true. And I'm glad you said that. So you are not a morning person. You just have a habit of waking up early and a preference. It's not who you are. It's what you do. When we learn to separate habit from identity, if you had to become a night person, what would you do? Go to sleep later, stay up later. And, when people say I'm lazy, you're not lazy. You've had maybe a history or a past of maybe making lazy decisions, but that's not who you are. It's what you've done. And it's not who you are. It's not who you can be. It's what you can do or not do. So if we are free from those identity pieces, then it's habits, and habits can change in an instant.
Right.
Easier said than done. Absolutely. Better done than said. What happens if we separated habit from identity? It would allow us the freedom to move. You are not what you did. You are not what happened to you. You are not what you choose to do right now. You are you. But the good thing is those habits can change. We have to detach identity from habit if we want a chance at change towards the life we want. And I'm not talking about being a millionaire or anything like that. I'm talking about quality of life, contentment. Contentment will never come if you've attached yourself to an identity that doesn't serve you.
Right.
It's
all about, and I was just going to say, it's all about choice.
It really is. But that's so vital to me. I never felt like I had a choice growing up, even though I did. I just didn't have the maturity or the understanding that I do now of idea and thought and the free will of choice. I just wanted to throw that in there. That's super important to me.
That's great. And your primary website, if people want to find you, is chrisruden.com, CHRISRUDEN.com. I'll have that in the show notes. It looks like you're also on LinkedIn and Instagram and YouTube. So we'll make sure all those links are available to people. Perfect. I just want to thank you so much. I reached out to you randomly on LinkedIn, and it's always a little bit surprising and very heartwarming when someone reaches back out and says, yeah, I'm in, let's do this, and doesn't know me from a hole in the wall yet. Here we are. And it's been such a privilege to learn about you and your story and to understand the path that you've navigated, and frankly, inspirational to see the impact that you're having in many ways that you're doing it. I'm so glad to know you. I am grateful that you spent this time with us today, and just want to thank you so much for all of your time and the wisdom and stories that you generously shared.
I really appreciate that. And my take on that is everyone I know now, at a certain point, I didn't know. And if I never took the chance, or they never took the chance, I wouldn't know them to the degree I know them today. Giving people a chance to get to know you, I think that's the humanity piece. That's what social media was supposed to be for.
That's right.
Not everyone is just trying to take something from you. So one, I appreciate that you took the risk on yourself and your listeners to do this. But more importantly, you have your cliff dive moment. Sharing that story and the messages of yourself and other people is what 14-year-old me needed most. I vow to be the person I never had growing up. But what you're doing is giving the former version of me a chance and curiosity to say, maybe there's another way. So I really appreciate what you're doing. Diving deep like this is not easy. So thank you for continually putting yourself out there, being vulnerable enough to share parts of your story and help other people as well. So I'm very glad to be a part of it.
Wow. Thank you so much. Everything that you just said really touched my heart. I appreciate it. All right, everyone. That brings this episode of Stories We Haven't Shared to a close. I believe stories are our humanity waiting to be shared, and listening makes it possible. Thanks so much for being here by our virtual campfire today. Until next time, and thank you so much to Chris Ruden. Appreciate you. Bye.